Yeah, this is like my baby album. So it's my parents when they were, I guess, 27. There are a lot of photos of me sitting in trees, I'm realizing. People have very different reasons why they do similar things. Like, I think all of us want to be good people, or I hope that all of us want to be good people. But the thing that drives us to be good people is so different across people of different faith backgrounds. And when you leave out a huge part of the conversation, which is people believe in Islam, they believe in their faith, and they want to do things for the sake of God, how can we use that to actually engage people in a different way, and a way that meets them where they are?
Always smiling. Always she had baby
pictures. Yeah, her baby pictures are adorable. She
lovely
looked like a doll.
We have lots of those if you want to see them. My Green Ummah, so my maternal grandmother, she was an educator and she taught English as a second language. My Green Ummah, so my paternal grandmother, she was also an educator. She moved here from apartheid South Africa. When she was young, she was kicked out of her house in South Africa. It was an area that was basically given over to white individuals. For a while they were homeless, and eventually they landed in this small little apartment where her and her many siblings would live. And downstairs there was this lady, and she was one of the founders of this group. And this group, basically, they were a bunch of what were considered housewives who started to raise money through an Indian South African cookbook. And they told my grandmother, we will happily support you in your education with the money from this cookbook, but show us the grades, show us you care. So she did, and literally the result of this Indian cookbook, that's why I'm here. Like, that was the thing that funded my grandmother to be the first in her family to get an education, and to then, of course, become a teacher, and then, of course, have the mobility to come to Canada. Like, this group of what apartheid considered housewives with no significance to the state completely changed the life of my family and the fabric of my own life. I spent so much time with both my grandmothers in the kitchen, and it's interesting, the kitchen is often very much belittled as like, oh, the housewives are there, but we would be sitting in the kitchen and having these really interesting conversations about apartheid and about activism and about politics and about community. And so I spent so much time with my grandmothers, like cooking and making great food, but then also really, really learning about the meaning for them to have chosen lives that were about education and empowerment. Ultimately, if you dig deep into the why, it's that we're doing this for the sake of, faith. The value of community activism to us was consistent with the value of being a Muslim. And so many of the conversations were about doing it fi sabilillah, or like for the sake of God. In my undergrad, I got involved with the Canadian Muslim Vote. I actually met the co-founders of Green Ummah there. There were so many of us all around the same age, all with very similar value sets, and we had so much energy and we wanted to do something together. I'd been in nature for so much of my life. Like, we went on a lot of hikes, we did a lot of camping together as a family, but I didn't really engage as a quote-unquote environmentalist or as an activist. It wasn't something that really crossed my mind. And then I took this course at the University of Toronto, which was about nature in the city. I realized that there's so much nature around us, and we need to engage with that and find ways of building and protecting those spaces, and also helping the people who might not have been part of the conversation or might not have heard of those spaces, helping bring them into those spaces. So when Adil called me up, and Adil was my coworker from Canadian Muslim Vote, he called me and said, listen, I had an idea. I went to this lecture and they were talking about how there's no faith-based organizing around the environment, and I think we should do something. There's something here and I don't know what it is, but do you want to build it with me? I was like, yes, absolutely. So myself, Adil, and Mariam Rajabali, the three of us, we got together in my dining room and we're like, let's do this thing. We put a call out on Instagram. We were like, anyone who is tangentially interested in the environment in Islam, like, please come to my house. And there were a ton of people I didn't even know who just showed up, and we all sat in my dining room together and had this conversation and realized, like, the way that we had engaged with the environment, all of us, even all of us being Muslims, was in a very sort of secular way. We had not thought about how in our tradition there actually are conversations about the environment, and there are conversations about engaging with nature. Originally, we wanted to use Green Ummah as a way of traditionally organizing and going to mosques in person and canvassing and knocking on doors just like you would in politics. And then the pandemic happened and we sort of lost access to all of our knowledge about how to do civic organizing. So for us, we started as a digital campaign. and it blew up in a way that we didn't even expect. Like we went from 0 to 1,000 followers in like a couple of days because people really wanted to find new ways of connecting. After that campaign, we realized that the gap we wanted to address is education. And I mean, education is so important to me given both my grandmothers being teachers, and the reason why we started Green Ummah was because of a lecture series. So we wanted to continue to build on that. We brought in a ton of volunteers to start building out the Greening Our Communities Toolkit, which is basically the first ever curriculum in the world, as far as I know, that talks about Islam and the environment. And so we built that out, found funding for it, and deployed it in like 5 schools as a pilot, and it had transformative impact for hundreds and hundreds of kids. And so with the curriculum, we first spoke about Islam and the environment, and we gave them the tools to think about it based in their own faith, and also spoke about how we can intertwine Islam and intertwine Indigenous perspectives about the environment into how we think about it and engage with nature. And then we send kids basically on this field trip, and they go to a national park or they go to a conservation site. And for these kids, they had never done that before. I mean, so these schools, a lot of them are under-resourced, like they don't necessarily have the ability to send kids. And these kids would go to these sites and come back and say, I've never been in nature before like that, and I want that to be my life. Like it really changed their perspective on how they wanted to engage in nature, not just in the moment and not just going to the forest, but also now finally thinking about what can I do to protect these spaces and make them better. I mean, my grandmother literally told me, she was like, Marium, this is the most important work that you could be doing. It really is her legacy. Like if she was able to impart one thing to us, it's a belief in our faith and a belief in community work. And so it makes her like really proud of the work that she's done. And because she also fought so hard, both my grandmothers fought so hard for us to even be able to be who we are in Canada and like not have to compromise in our values and beliefs. For me to be doing this work and doing it uncompromisingly is really, really special. They set the groundwork and I'm building on it.